You're tuning into the Wild, Weird, and Sometimes Normal podcast. If you have a story or a guest recommendation that you think others need to hear, email me at wildweirdandsometimesnormal@gmail.com. Let's get this started. Alex and Brett, kick it!
Wild. Wild. Weird. And sometimes wild. Weird. Wild. Weird. Wild. Weird. Wild. And sometimes normal.
This episode, my guest is Lizy Maratea. She is the founder of Full Spectrum Compassionate Coaching. We have an interesting conversation on full body mental health and wellness. In Lizy's practice, she incorporates cannabis and has clients worldwide. Some of our conversations touch on the medical benefits of cannabis, how far we've come from street marijuana to government-regulated dispensaries, and why marijuana itself is a stigmatized word and should be replaced with cannabis. Enjoy the show. Are you looking for CBD for your pet? My friends at Pure Pet Wellness have what you need. They use the highest quality ingredients. While other companies may use synthetic oils in their CBD, Pure Pet Wellness uses organic ingredients, organically grown hemp, organic coconut oil, organic shea butter, organic beeswax, and that's just to name a few. A family-owned and operated company that also offers fast shipping. Go to purepetwellness.com for all your pet's CBD needs and use the discount code WILD and WEIRD at checkout. That's WILD, A-N-D, WEIRD. Treat your animal right. Go to purepetwellness.com. Are you looking to buy a home in New Jersey, escape the city and move to the suburbs? Finally purchase a vacation home on the lake or down the shore? Maybe you're one of the lucky ones who are retiring and moving out of state. If so, let me help you. Keller Williams and the Real Estate Professional Group have what you need to make your goals come true. Reach out and have a conversation with someone who will put you first. Contact Brian McCoach at 856-321-1212 or email brianmccoach@kw.com. Welcome to another episode of Wild, Weird, and Sometimes Normal. I'm your host, Brian, and tonight's guest is Lizy Maratea, Full Spectrum Compassionate Coaching. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat tonight.
I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
So you are the creator of Full Spectrum Compassionate Coaching. Can you expand on that a little bit?
My coaching practice is a compassionate practice. So it's a combination of coaching on self-compassion. I work a great deal with trauma survivors, as well as coaching on mindfulness and movement that support that compassion and support a full spectrum wellness lifestyle, one where there's autonomy and independence and balance and trust, as well as comprehensive cannabis protocol for those that are looking for cannabis education and medicinal cannabis in their life to support them either with pain management or anxiety, depression, and very many things. So I combine all of those tools together to create a unique regimen for each of my clients that helps them to achieve their ambitions in their life of happiness, of comfort, and anything else that they're trying to do professionally or personally.
Yeah, so for example, somebody's coming to you with an anxiety that they can't get over, or they don't want to go with prescription drugs and they'd rather approach it on a more holistic approach?
Absolutely. I often help with their diets, with things that are inflammatory, maybe helping to eliminate those, helping to find roots of dysfunctional cycles or irrational thoughts, things that are holding them back from progress in their lives. Many of my clients have entered into therapy after beginning working with me, something that they were anxious about before. Maybe they had bad experiences. Oftentimes they feel more comfortable talking to me about certain things that, like their cannabis use, for example, that they don't feel comfortable talking to their therapist or psychologist about. So they will supplement really that mental health care with coaching. And it also reaffirms their actions that come from therapy, and their sleep routine or hydration is a really big thing. Hygiene is a really big thing. It's one of the first things to go when people are feeling depressed or their self-worth is low. Brushing their teeth or a simple shower can be really hard to do. So having someone beyond the therapist, beyond the clinical setting, to support them not the ability to text them a couple times a week and check in, see how are things going, lead them in meditations, maybe even check in with a quick session on their off day if they need it. So I can meet them in a place that's kind of between self-reliance and the clinical support.
It's just fascinating. So you briefly touched on inflammation through diet. Are there a few type of examples you could give of high inflammation food that people should try to avoid to possibly better their health or their mentality? Things are going to bring them down through their diet?
Oh, absolutely. The two biggest culprits are gluten and sugar. A lot of people feel that there's a gluten-free fad happening. Honestly, it's the same with cannabis. I argue that people who medicate with cannabis recreationally, quote unquote, are treating something that they might not realize, like their anxiety or depression, social anxieties in particular. Tapping into some creative parts of themselves can be inspired that way. And it's the same when people eliminate gluten. Maybe they're trying to lose weight. I'm not really of the mind of dieting for weight. I'm more of adjusting one's lifestyle for comfort. So cutting out things like gluten and sugar, they'll find that their inflammation reduces. These things feed it big time. And I mean, we need inflammation to some extent, of course, when it comes to injury. It helps to heal, helps to protect. But when it's overactive, when it's fed things like gluten and sugar, we become really uncomfortable and we experience chronic pain. This contributes to anxiety, this contributes to depression, contributes to heart disease. You can pretty much take any affliction and bring it right back to inflammation, overactive inflammation as the source. So when you reduce that, when you cut out the things that feed it, it's a total life changer. It can take, I myself was taking thousands of milligrams of Motrin on really bad pain days when I have endometriosis flare-ups. When I cut out gluten and sugar, cut it down to maybe a couple hundred milligrams a day, also with the support of cannabis medicine, it's changed everything. I mean, that's saving my liver, that's causing more inflammation, even really from over medicating with opioids.
Wow. So sugar, I think, is pretty obvious for people that, the sodas, the candies, all the stuff that you had growing up that was delicious. And as you get older, a box of Fruity Pebbles, as delicious as it is, it's probably not the best for you. Gluten, I'm sorry, I'm a little ignorant on the topic of gluten. I've seen breads that are gluten-free. Where else are we finding gluten in our diet?
Anything that has flour, wheat flour, rye flour. They have gluten-free pizza crusts now that are made from cauliflower. Now they're gluten-free is going to have wheat flour in it. Anything with wheat flour, the act of, mixing it with agents to help it stick together, that's creating a gluten when it holds together. And that builds up in the body. And just the process of breaking it down stimulates this inflammation in joints. So if I eat something like a piece of toast, I will feel it. I have a chronic joint disorder also, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So I have arthritis. I'm in chronic pain my entire life. And I feel it in my knuckles, the arthritis in my knuckles, whenever I eat something that is going to feed my inflammation. I'll feel it in all of my joints right away.
How long will it take to process out of your body until you feel better?
That's person to person. I always encourage people to give it a month, give 1 month and see how they feel. We're talking about 1 month out of years of life, right? It's worth it to try and just see, because maybe it's not the answer for everyone, but typically the human body, inflammation is a problem. So anything that feeds it, we want to try to at least reduce as much as possible. Psoriasis, for example, is an inflammatory affliction, and that's overinflamed epidermis. So cutting out gluten, people have found major support in that when it comes to their psoriasis. I know a child who's nonverbal on the spectrum. They cut out gluten. They started talking. They eat pizza. They didn't talk for days.
Oh my gosh. Pizza's the cure for everything. I've known this for a long time. I've been trying to tell people. No, that's absolutely amazing. It's amazing that this child, nonverbal, on the autism spectrum, the parents, you're trying to grasp around a condition that's not fully understood, that there's not a go-to medication for, and sometimes those parents could feel left out, and then the child could be trapped in their world. And then to just through a diet, have them respond and have them come back and be able to interact. That's just absolutely amazing.
It's amazing. I have a patient that would come to the dispensary that I worked at, and this man is suffering from Parkinson's. He was shaking terribly all over as he came in. And he was finally at that place where he was like, enough is enough. I'm going to try cannabis. Senior citizen, and been told his whole life, don't touch this stuff for various reasons, all the stigmas that you hear. And he said, enough's enough. I'm going to try
Reefer madness. You have to be careful of this. Reefer madness. People are going to go insane and jump out of a window.
I know, and kill your family with an axe. Which is it? Do I have the energy to kill somebody with an axe, or am I stuck on the couch drooling on myself? Pick a poison.
It's hard to tell. Hard to tell.
It's really hard to tell. But he was like, okay, I'm going to go for it. And because I was able to help him understand how cannabis works and that he didn't need to be, risking getting so stoned that he's terrified, measuring out the terpenes and the cannabinoids that would support him, we found the products that helped. And we also talked to him. I talked to him as the cannabis agent about reducing inflammation in his diet and other places in his life. He came in a few weeks later and he held out his hand. I mean, it was the most incredible thing. Everybody cried because he was still, and I mean, this isn't 24/7. He still, tremors quite a bit, but this was huge. This was night and day difference from when he walked in. And it's simple changes that can be self-sufficient, but instead in America and around the world, we're taught, well, here, throw this medication at it. And when that one has a bunch of effects, you're going to need to throw medications at all of those too. When really, and what I'm excited to talk to you about today, the endocannabinoid system, everybody has one, and understanding how it works and what turns it on to work properly to maintain homeostasis and what affects its processes like inflammation, learning how that works and how our bodies work can change everything. And we can go from not speaking to speaking because inflammation we're still learning what it does neurologically. We don't know how many people today, a great majority, I would say, are feeling their anxiety because of not just things they've inherited through their families and dysfunctional cycles and trauma, but also what they're eating. Just changing what they eat or changing what they consume energetically, like social media. What are they eating in that respect also? And how that can change everything. I ramble because I get very excited.
No, I think that's fine. And I think looking at social media like junk food is a good way to look at it. And that is the sugar that you don't need in your life. Since I've started this podcast and I've been editing and recording, I've been very busy. I have not been on Twitter nearly as much. And you would have no idea that the entire world is falling apart at every single second. And half the country hates each other. And, whatever else might be going on of these manufactured fears that they're trying to drive into people to just break people down, keep them locked inside their house or locked inside themselves internally and not function with their neighbor, with a friend, to just go to factory farming, to just go to the store and get this processed meat and not go find a local farmer, not go get fresh vegetables, not go to the farm market on the weekends, on like Main Street, wherever it might be, to go there and get the fresh vegetables that somebody in your neighborhood is growing for you, that is putting care into it and not injecting with chemicals to make them turn a certain color or make them brighter. It's really a shame. You talked about sugar for a second. I made a Fruity Pebbles joke though.
No, my husband
so
every night before bed.
It's a great tech. Good for him. I know you're much more familiar, it seems, in the cannabis world for alcohol. And I know people can abuse alcohol or use alcohol, to try to deal with anxiety or to, use as a social lubricant. Now cutting out sugars completely, a lot of alcohol is filled with sugar. Some people will find it hard to cut it out. Or, I won't be able to go to the party. I won't be able to go to I don't even know what holiday's coming up. I won't be able to go to Cinco de Mayo and talk to my friends at the Mexican restaurant unless I have 7 margaritas. What is the low sugar alcohol for somebody to responsibly have a drink or two to reduce inflammation and move forward?
Well, honestly, I'd recommend cannabis. I'd say try cannabis instead. It doesn't cause liver disease. It doesn't. Cannabis has never killed anybody because the receptors that receive the messages from cannabis, they're not plentiful on the brainstem, so that it won't cause you to stop breathing. So it doesn't shut the body down like alcohol does. It doesn't cause a gut like alcohol does. It doesn't alter the brain chemistry the way that alcohol does. And by partaking of cannabis and tending to the endocannabinoid system that has this anxiety that is dysfunctioning because of whatever habits or feelings surrounding this social situation or thinking like, oh, we have to drink in order to be able to feel comfortable in this place. All of that is something out of whack. So tending the underlying issue by treating it with cannabinoids that can turn everything the right way within the body and tend to that anxiety. In my mind, that's gouging the wound, that's scraping out all the infection as opposed to a sparkly little alcohol Band-Aid that might get you through the night, but in the long term, it's taking years off of you. And it's a false sense of security. It's a false sense of comfort. I would rather attend the underlying issue than mask it. And if you want to have a drink, I'm a red wine gal myself. The glucose index is low. There's a lot of antioxidant benefits. If you look at the Greeks, they have the top tier for longevity. We look to them a lot for the Mediterranean diet, the high in fish like salmon, nuts, and things. They live the longest in the world, and they're pretty happy for the most part when it comes to their diet and their physical shape. You don't hear a lot of inflammation coming out of Greece either. And red wine is on the list of, a little bit of this. And there's also kombucha, which has a little bit of alcohol in it, but it'll tend that gut health because it has the vinegar for anybody that has yeast overgrowth, which I'd say probably all of America does.
One could look at people, and people think that they're in control and they're making their decisions every day. But if you really get down to it, a lot of it does seem that's driven by gut health. Your gut is driving you to do what you think you want to do. What are the best ways to, either through the diet or through cannabis or things like this, to help get that in the right direction?
I would say mind-body connection is a major, major factor. Big problem, especially in the United States, is the disconnect there. We don't trust ourselves. As you mentioned, people feel like, more compelled to go buy processed foods than to support a neighborhood by purchasing in the farmer's market and being more connected in that way. That's energetic exchange. When you're spending that extra dollar, but it's a local business, you're feeding a friend, you're feeding a neighbor. So you're getting even more from it that way. So looking at things from that perspective and understanding that the mind itself, we're still learning about this. There's more that we don't know than human beings have time left to learn. That's the truth of it. We don't understand energy fully. We know it cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change form. We know that the brain is not, the little epicenter that we always believed it to be. There's a growing theory that the mind is even external to the body. And that's why we carry grief in our shoulders, or anxiety in our knees and in our necks, or we carry joy in our jaws, because the body is more connected to the spirit and the emotion and to the mind than people realize. So when we feed ourselves, it's more than just the chemical response of sugar and dye, which is just, that's a whole nother thing, the dye that's in the foods. But it's more than just the chemical effects that they inspire, but it's the endocannabinoid system being able to function properly because it's being fed with healthy things energetically and physically, like you said with the farmers market. And I mean, our generation has been in a crisis forever. It's just been nonstop awful. Like you said, we're having these things kind of slammed down our throats. Generations prior had the advantage of naivete. They didn't know what was going on in neighboring states. They only knew what was going on in their neighborhood. Now we're aware of everything. We're aware of all the awful. And that is contributing to our gut health. It's making us anxious. When we feel anxious, we get tummy aches, right? I mean, that's how humans work, but we take for granted that connection. We'll trust to some extent, but really we're conditioned to believe unless a doctor can tell me to take 2 of these and call him in the morning or her in the morning, and then go back and forth trying this medication. Like, I trust them to tell me everything that I need to do. Instead of bringing some of that trust back on ourselves, we give it all away. And that leaves everything in a state of dysfunction also.
I feel like that's a Western world view of, that you don't trust your body and that only a doctor can tell you how to feel right. And, you said that we're still learning about the mind and the body. And I feel some of the Eastern medicine already knows this. And it's more that we forgot it. And we're trying to relearn and reestablish. There's a pill for everything. And if that pill doesn't work, there's 2 more to fix that one. Yeah. And a lot of the medicine is derived through plants that they're synthetically creating then. So it's already there naturally for you, that at some point, a local doctor, who didn't have 17 degrees from Duke University and is on the payroll of a pharmaceutical company, but like a local doctor understood that if your stomach was hurting, to give you this plant or whatever it might be, unless something is broken, a fracture sticking out of your skin, like, yes, you definitely should go to the hospital. You should go to the doctor. You should get that treated. And natural medicine is not for everybody on day one, and maybe baby steps your way to learning more and to experiencing and going to some of these health stores and talking to somebody who has experience. To me, it just seems that we are dragging our feet to try to learn a little more when a lot of those answers are already there, but they've been poo-pooed for so long. Even cannabis being a Schedule 1 narcotic and never should have been that.
It's insane. It's absolutely ridiculous that it's a Schedule 1. And it all really comes down to following the money. That's what it is. I mean, where's the money in something that people can self-sustain, where they can grow their own, they can find what works. And that ancient wisdom is there. But America went so far as to be almost solely responsible for the illegalization of cannabis in India, because they threatened embargoes if they didn't. So they still have bhang in the street. It's like a street milk that they make with cannabis, but you can't consume the flower itself in India because America said, oh, if you do, we're going to get mad at you. The reach was that far for the money. And cannabis is shown to cause apoptosis, cause cancer cell suicide, essentially. There's so much money in cancer treatment in this country. People don't want that. The whole reason it became illegal in the first place is because William Randolph Hearst owned the lumber mills and the newspapers, and hemp was far more sustainable, and because alcohol became legal. So Harry Anslinger needed something new to charge after. Nixon, he had his own. I could go on. Like, it's all vested interests and money.
Right, but they voted to make marijuana illegal, which was not the common term at that time. And that was a Mexican scare term to use, where everybody was like, oh, well, you have to make that illegal because those people down there are so terrible. And then finding out that you just made illegal what you were growing on your own property.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you know that. That was William Randolph Hearst is pretty much responsible for the term marijuana. He combined Maria and Juan and said, if you smoke this, you're going to be hacked to death by an axe like this Mexican did over here, which was preposterous, absolutely ridiculous. And then they actually made hemp illegal, and I believe it was Kentucky, because there was this fear that, oh, if people were growing hemp, which many don't realize isn't cannabis without the buds. It's not even like the plant, but doesn't flower. It's its own plant. It's a cousin to cannabis. And has been used for thousands of years to make rope and textiles. And the first American flag is believed to have been made with hemp. George Washington grew it. If you didn't grow it in his time, you had to pay a fine for not growing it because they needed it because it was so sustainable. And it was made illegal in Kentucky because they said, oh, well, somebody might sneak 10 cannabis plants in the middle of their hemp field. So let's just throw the baby out with the bathwater, which is ridiculous. It's all so backward. We could be much farther advanced with the science, with the understanding. Other countries could as well. But because America is such a international powerhouse, they don't want to piss us off. So things have been limited elsewhere also, and they have their own interests in other countries as well. There's more money in opiates. There's more money in people who are dependent on opiates and all the other problems that come along with inflammatory illnesses like we've been talking about.
Right. There's no money in a cure, but there is money in a consistent treatment. And then if we can give you another pill to make that other pill's side effects go away, it's double the money.
Absolutely. And in fact, the endocannabinoid system, which we all have, all vertebrates have them. It's only taught to about 15% of medical professionals in college. How insane is that? Like, this is the literal system in the body. It's the reason you blink when you look at the sun. It's the reason you shiver when you're cold and you sweat when you're hot, because it is the communication highway within the body responsible for maintaining homeostasis. It's the only retrograde system we have that communicates between the cardiovascular and the musculoskeletal to say, hey, you're really cold, you should shiver to warm up. It's the one that sends those messages. We need to know about this. We need to know that the endocannabinoid that we produce within our bodies, it's called anandamide. That's what's responsible for the runner's high that people who run get. I don't run, but people who run and they enjoy it, that's anandamide doing its thing. And when you're properly producing anandamide, which is an agonist, and it can be supplemented, THC is actually its phyto counterpart. It's a partial agonist, so it'll turn the dial just enough to help you feel motivation, pleasure. You cannot feel these things if you're anandamide deficient. People who have PTSD, who have chronic depression, they are devoid of anandamide. It's produced in the hippocampus on demand as we need it so that we can enhance our mood so that we can sleep well. And it supports diet and appetite, just like you're saying, like what we crave to put in our bodies, what's directed by our gut. Anandamide plays a role in it. So this common sense tells you everybody should know about this, right? They should be teaching kids about this. We should know what causes depression. We should know what causes PTSD. We should know what we need to tend in order to help alleviate these things. But they don't even teach it to most doctors. Why? The money, right?
Right. Everything goes back to the money. It's really just sad, just polluting our bodies by pharmaceuticals that are not always needed. I'm not saying that all pharmaceuticals are bad. People do, they need things. There are great things that science has developed. But to go to a doctor and you're talking about 15% of them are actually knowledgeable on things that could help your body and then to regulate. And for them not to know, but then they have no problem pulling out their script pad and writing whatever it might be.
Furthermore, CBD has been shown to really, truly curb heroin withdrawal symptoms by up to a week with one dose. That's major. Why is that being so truly suppressed? I can't even advertise my practice on Facebook because if they go back to my landing page and they see the word cannabis on there, I could get shut down because it's still federally illegal. So people can't even get out there, and unless you're subscribing to Mary Jane newsletter or if you get Leaf magazine at your local dispensary, like how are you going to learn that there's even an option out there for someone to teach you how to safely and properly use cannabis? You have to start really digging around. The cannabis coaches like what I do, we're a new wave. The first cannabis coach in the entire country, Christina Rizzola, she's down in Florida. She works with a doctor. The patients come in. They need the support to show them, what it is that they're doing, how to do what they need, and how to make choices and what it does to help them. I was her mentee. So I'm just the first degree away from Kevin Bacon, so to speak. And I work with clients in Canada. I have a client in Finland. I have a client in Alaska. And my Finnish client, they don't even have cannabis there. So I have to help him with cannabinoids and terpenes from other sources to try and do what we can to stimulate the endocannabinoid system. And it's made a world of difference in all of my clients, all around the world. But they have to really search for me to find me, to get this information, to gain this experience and this wisdom, because we can't advertise. We can't talk about it.
Right. So the United States, federally marijuana, cannabis, illegal. A lot of states have gone forward with making it legal, but you're still at that crossroads where a dispensary can have it. It may not have support of the local medical community or the state medical community, the Department of Health or anything like that. But you're allowed to have a dispensary. You can sometimes you just go in recreationally. Other times you may need a prescription, correct?
You need registration, yeah.
Registration, right. I'm sorry. So you can either go recreationally or registration. But then some of the issues that I've seen are the sales, the money that dispensary takes in, that some banks won't take it because of the federal issues of that they're accepting drug money then, that the bank still views the dispensaries as a drug dealer because the feds have not come in and made it legal. Have you had any issues with that?
Unfortunately, since I don't deal in product, I'm able to have a business bank account, but I did have to jump through a lot of hoops. As you notice, my practice is called full spectrum compassionate coaching, because compassionate is kind of a known word to be synonymous with cannabis in the wellness world, because if I had the word cannabis in my title, the bank could not take me. And I had to make sure I called ahead for Wix for my website, that I called ahead for Zoom, that I called ahead for PayPal, that I called ahead for PNC, and let them all know I do not sell cannabis. I don't even sell hemp wick to smoke it with. It's a verbal thing that I deliver. It's a remote practice. And I had to make sure that they all knew that, because if anything came across buzzing cannabis, I'm done. I'm shut down. You have to jump through a lot of hoops, and you have to have an insane amount of money and capital to be in this industry as a dispensary owner or a grower or somebody who manufactures products. You have to really, really be deep in there, and you have to go through, a lot of hoops. They're starting to open that up a little bit now with banks. Like the local dispensaries here can accept card now, but for a long time it was a cash only business, which makes it a little more vulnerable. And then it also limits how the money can get back into the community. I mean, you look at Colorado and their infrastructure and their schools are benefiting immensely from legalized cannabis. So we're sitting on this cash, on this opportunity, and it's going to waste. And they're finding other ways to do money grabs. So you see things, we spoke of synthetics earlier, like Delta 8. That's what Delta 8 is a money grab. They are still finding ways to produce things. They're still finding ways to slip it through the cracks. And this one's sold in gas stations. People are buying Delta 8 of Valero and then messaging me later saying, I'm in the fetal position freaking out. I thought this wasn't going to get me high. Oh, it's going to get you high. And it's a totally foreign thing. Chemists aren't making this. CBD producers who aren't making as much money off the CBD, but they can sell over the counter because all cannabis products are so restricted because of the federal law, that they created this new thing. They synthetically pulled, some Delta 8 from cannabis products and then synthesized it to make it a lot more profitable, and people are freaking out on it. And real chemists can't even identify all the byproducts in it because it's such a new thing. It's dangerous. It's harmful. So these restrictions are really causing all new problems that we don't need to have. We could totally avoid this.
Right. And the synthetics are hard to approach because you can't just outlaw. Let's say we're talking about sneakers. You're like, okay, so Nike is the brand, for example, Nike is the brand that we have to stay away from. But with the synthetics, they just change the chemical compound by put an extra hydrogen atom in there. And then that changes the entire chemical compound. So that Nike sneaker that was illegal suddenly becomes, an Adidas or something. And you're never able to stay up. You can't just say sneakers are illegal, because you have to specifically say exactly what's going to become illegal.
Yep. So the cat's out of the bag before they could even try and pull it over. And it's the same as copyright for music. You add a note and it's entirely new, and they can get away with it. And unfortunately, a lot of dispensaries, especially the ones that I've had to call for clients to find out what products they have and make sure that I'm recommending the right things and asking about their staff. A lot of them, they don't have the wherewithal, the money, or the concern really to educate their staff. Some are very educated. In the dispensary that I worked at here in Maryland, very educated, but still you only get a certain amount of time with each patient as they come through. You're not able to sit there and talk to them about what exactly everything is going wrong with them. You can't really go over their medications. I work with a pharmacist that I send all the meds lists of my clients to before we begin working together. And if they add anything, I will consult them to make sure that nothing's going to conflict. There's certain medications for blood pressure that you really cannot consume cannabis. Like if you're not supposed to eat grapefruit on this medication, you really shouldn't do cannabis either. So making sure that I have a network to discuss that is really, really important. And dispensary agents just can't do that. They can't go home with somebody and teach this 70-year-old woman how to spark a bowl. That's what she wants to do, whereas I can meet with them virtually, and I can help her do that. I can take the time and really educate them.
So I feel the younger clients may be a little easier to approach if they were on the fence of, is cannabis right for me or not? They haven't had the propaganda pushed on them for their entire, maybe it is their entire life, but it's a lot younger. Now, the older patients, 60s, 70s, you said a man had Parkinson's and he was older. What is it like approaching them? Their entire life, they have everything they've ever seen from newspapers, from government releases to anything, is how bad marijuana is for you. Now, legal in states now possibly can help them with their conditions. Are they receptive? Does it take more massaging to get them to understand the message?
Oh, there's certainly skeptics in that community. I've spoken to a few senior communities and given presentations on the endocannabinoid system, on cannabis, just general 101. And one thing that I'm always very careful of is not to make them feel as though they've been fooled. I don't like to say they like to generalize the entire senior community, but it is important not to say like your government lied to you and you ate up every word of that bullshit. Like that's not going to get me anywhere.
You have to skip that part.
So oftentimes the senior community, I will highlight specifically how it targets arthritis inflammation. Or I had one older gentleman with glaucoma asked me, and severe pain, and he asked me, how come my pain management specialist that I pay all this money to, that my insurance that I go to, how come he tells me don't smoke marijuana, do this instead? And I said, well, there isn't a cannabis rep in a cute suit with a trip to Cancun rolling into his office the next day with a prescription pad. That's the simplest way I can say it to you. And he was like, all right, I get it. Yeah, that makes sense. And sometimes it does take some massaging to get to the science, but you don't want to overwhelm people. That's why a coach is important, because we can bridge that gap between doctor and dispensary, so we're not dropping all this clinical jargon on them and making them, anyone really, feel dumb, because I mean, it is a lot. I have some pretty sciencey books in front of me that teach about terpenes and cannabinoids and how everything works in the body. So I don't want to overwhelm people, but I also don't want to patronize. So finding a way to connect with each person, and just like if you're selling something, I used to sell appliances. I'm not going to tell somebody who has filtered water at the sink, buy this fridge that has a water filter in. I'm going to talk to them about the benefits, not the features. So when it comes to cannabis, I connect with the older generation and speak to them how this is going to work for you, because they don't want to hear all this stuff. They don't want to hear somebody try and say it's a cure-all, because that's a dangerous precedent to set also. They want to know, how is this going to work for me? Keep it short, keep it simple, less is more, help me to understand this, where it doesn't suggest that you think I'm some sort of idiot that bought into propaganda all my life, because truly that is all they knew. That's all the older generations were told, that it's terrible, it's going to ruin your life, it's going to steal your daughters away, it's all these horrible things. And our generation grew up with Dare, or the Your Brain on Drugs commercials. It's a hard thing to unlearn, being able to trust yourself, and then telling them that, oh, by the way, I can't tell you take this exact strain at this time and this much. You're going to have to learn what works for you and when and how. Oh no, that's a really hard thing for people to hear. So I have to often remind people, have you ever been to Wawa for a hoagie? Have you ever built yourself a salad? You learn what you like that goes together. You've been able to build that regimen for yourself. You can do the same thing with your lifestyle, with diet, like gluten and sugar and what works for you. And you can do the same thing with your cannabis medicine, and also what complements it, because the terpenes that are in cannabis are also present in foods and herbs and spices. And if you've ever heard of eating mango before smoking weed because it makes it last longer, that's legit. And that's something that the subculture has always known, but professionals are starting to learn now, because all of us who've been smoking weed in our sheds for 20 years are able to come out and say, hey, here's all my knowledge I've been sitting on. Oh, and here's all the ancient texts from China and the Ukraine and everywhere else that's been consuming cannabis for years. And here's all the information out of Jamaica that you've been laughing at all these years, but it's legit. In fact, if you ever were to smoke too much cannabis, which we've all been there, but getting too high, 15-year-old me would have really appreciated knowing that a little bit of CBD levels it right out, or chewing on a black peppercorn can bring you right down, because the cannabinoids in the peppercorn and the CBD, both of those can chill THC. As long as there's more CBD than THC, the euphoric effects are kept in check. That's something that's very useful to know. That's something that I like to make all physicians know. It's something I like to make my local EMS, let them know. If somebody comes to you and it's an older person in particular who's starting to get really, really scared because they're higher than they've ever been in their life and they're new to this feeling, explaining to them what they can do to bring it back down. That's also something you can't do with alcohol unless you get hooked up to a banana bag. You can't just respond to your body systems in a way that brings balance. Like, you're drunk, you're drunk.
Yeah, you're on the floor and the room's spinning, and good luck. The peppercorn and the CBD, that's interesting. I've never heard that. And it used to be just ride it out and you'll be okay. And nobody's ever overdosed on marijuana, and you're going to be fine.
Yeah. And there's other techniques. You say that you reassure a person if you're helping someone through an uncomfortable situation. Okay, let's give this 15 minutes. Let's focus on our breath. That's also more of what I do. I provide recorded meditations for my clients. I always guide them in a meditation in our sessions together. Sometimes I'll record them a custom meditation. And one of them in particular is one to come down from an anxiety attack, or if you get a little too far with the THC, to help you reconnect with your mind and your body, to bring you back here. Because if we aren't here, if we're not right here in the present, in this moment, we're either in the past or the future. And neither of those places can be influenced by our thoughts right here, right now. We can't do anything about them. So bringing ourselves back here and maybe watching something funny, or having a snack, or just having a conversation and keeping ourselves occupied until it starts to level out, can be extremely beneficial. But there can be support in just chewing a peppercorn. One, it burns like hell, so it shocks you out of it a little bit. But really, the beta caryophyllene that's present in it counteracts the THC and keeps it chill.
Who's the ideal client for you? Somebody sitting at home, they're not sure what to do. They're trapped in their in their own world and, having a hard time, who should reach out to you?
Honestly, I have room for everybody. My clients it's a very diverse spread. It's amazing as a coach and I speak to my clients about this all the time, and as a human being, just the evolution and how much we don't see it coming. And originally what I intended my niche market to be, because there's room for everybody. There's only so many clients that coach can take on at one time. And there's so many different things that cannabis can support and that other aspects of coaching can support, like the mindfulness meditation, that I thought originally, okay, well, I want to work with older community. I want to work with people with Alzheimer's and dementia, because cannabis is shown to reduce the inflammation on the brain with the tartar buildup that causes Alzheimer's and dementia, which is, that's huge, really huge. My first job was in a nursing home, and I just watched their memories just deteriorate before my eyes, and it was heartbreaking. And I went into coaching intending to do that. But what my intuition drew me to, and who was drawn to me, turned out to be trauma survivors, because that's my experience. That's my story. And I ended up working a lot with women in their 20s. This generation, they've had enough. They're not going to repeat the cycles. They're not going to wait until they're in their 30s and 40s to start dealing with their crap. They want to deal with it now, and they want to correct it now and have a good full life. And I think that is so incredible. And I have one client. He's a 22-year-old man, has had a much different life than my own. He has had gang experiences. He's grown up in a completely different environment than I have. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia. It changed his entire life. He ended up being basically a shut-in, and he would smoke whatever cannabis he could get his hands on, and it would send him into psychosis. He was pacing the floor back and forth, peeling skin off of his face. But just by working with me and finding the correct cannabis cultivars to help him, he doesn't pace anymore. He's not picking his skin off his face. He's pursuing it from an educated place, and sprinkled in a little mindfulness and other little Lizy things that I sneak in there. But that's not a client that I necessarily would have sought out. But he found me. His mother found me, actually. So really, it's anybody who wants autonomy. I am all about that. And I have one of the stories that I often share with people, my dear friend Jared. He was a Marine, had PTSD, came home from the war, left his spirit there. And the doctors in the VA told him, take this, 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 and this. When he died of a heroin overdose, his sister and I found all these containers of all these different medications across his dresser. Some of them were doubles. Some of them never should be taken together because of different doctors not communicating, but they all told him across the board, stay away from weed. And it makes me angry, because the promise and just the results that have been delivered on cannabis for PTSD, my own included, could have spared him, could have saved his life. And knowing that it could curb heroin withdrawal too, like, this man should not be dead. And there's so many people. There's a theory that 50,000 lives, I think, is the average number of lives that is believed could be saved a year by cannabis, just for the opioids, the opioid pandemic. It's huge. So it's hard not to get, and I went off on a tangent there, but it's hard not to want to work with absolutely anybody who's curious, even just a little bit, to get their ball rolling. And then if they decide, hey, the mind-body connection is something I really feel like would support me, I want to help foster that in everybody, because it ripples out. It's not entirely selfless. I have a 9-year-old, that I want a wonderful world for. And anybody that I can help, I feel 100% certain that they're going to let that ripple out to other people and spread the message of self-sustaining autonomy and wellness. And that's going to create that wonderful world for my daughter. And there I go, blah, blah, blah.
No, that was a great answer. So you mentioned you have clients in Alaska and Finland. I doubt they're flying in to see you. Do you have an office? Is everything on Zoom?
This is it. This is my office. My desk is actually also my daughter's piano. So ingenuity. Yeah, it's all virtual. So actually, in one day for a while there, I was meeting with Finland at 8 a.m, which was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, his time. And then I was meeting with Alaska at 8 p.m, which was 4 o'clock in the evening, their time. So it was like a wild day. But I also have clients in Canada, Texas, Mississippi, Florida, Illinois, New Jersey, Maryland, all over the place in Canada. Before COVID, this was actually a gift from COVID. I had every intention of getting an office space, and I intended to work locally. And then I never heard of Zoom. I mean, how many people did before 2020? Yeah. But now it changed everything. And I'm able to have a wider reach and work with people of various legality situations. And some people grow their own, all different ages. I've worked with, the oldest client I've worked with is in their 90s, and the youngest is 20.
Do you find that Zoom brings in the type of client who probably wouldn't come into an office to sit down?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Because, well, also they want to be able to partake. That's part of like the perk of what I do. So I was trying to figure out, how am I going to do? I don't want to go to people's houses. That's dangerous. I certainly don't want people coming to my house and leaving here after consuming when we don't know how long it will take. I want them to be safe and secure and cozy in their home, but I don't want to be traveling to get to them and traveling back. And then that increases rates as well, because I have to think about that. I homeschool my daughter, so I'd have to figure out care for her. So it was actually a bit daunting entering into this. And then COVID was like, you get to work from home. And when you're done, you get to clock out and walk out. And there's baby girl right there in the living room. So it's really nice for my clients that they can say, okay, I can be cozy in my bed. I mean, I see everybody in their pajamas, and that's how I like it. Come real, bring a snack, bring a drink, because I'm here trying to help you 10 basic self-care. Am I watered? Am I fed? Am I rested? That's the most important. But we worry about all the other things first. So how many people wake up in the morning and they respond to text on their way to the bathroom before even taking a breath or having a drink of water or checking in with themselves? They give over to others. I want them to show up for themselves entirely, to hang up every hat, to hang up every coat, every cape, get cozy in their space, create a safe space within their home, or sometimes outside. I'll tell them, like, hey, it's a gorgeous day. Go sit on your porch and let's get in some of this fresh air together, even if it's hundreds of miles apart. It creates a lot more opportunity for, certainly, to be able to meet virtually.
Do you have any tips for a person in their office, they're in their cubicle, maybe they're having a hard time, like to find mindfulness, besides stay off social media? I think we figured that one out, but to just take a minute, what is something that they can do to recenter themselves, to get back to their square one?
Well, grounding is a term that's used pretty often. That can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I'll never tell my clients or my yoga students, I hesitate to even say yoga because that's more of a buzzword. What I do is mindful movement, but I will never tell anyone to take a deep breath, because what a deep breath means to you will be very different to what a deep breath means to somebody else. So I'll tell them to find their breath, locate the breath. Many times, most of the time, we as adults, we breathe and our chest comes out and our belly comes in. How many times have you seen people like, right? And they go back down. We're keeping ourselves in a constant state of hyperventilation because we're keeping our lower organs pressed in so our lungs can't expand fully. If you watch a baby breathe, they breathe in, their belly button rises, their belly opens up, creating space for the lungs to expand. And then we exhale, we draw the belly button toward the spine, really pressing out all that stale old air. And that's an entirely different breath. So just focusing on one breath like that, just noticing the sensation of the oxygen at the base of the nose, noticing how it feels, where we're bringing our breath. Is it the chest, is it the belly? Can we adjust that? Can we lengthen the exhale a little bit? Even just one breath gives our entire cell system a chance to, okay, I don't have to do anything else for this second. And that's huge. And if we're distracted, thoughts intrude, which they're designed to do. People are under this misconception that meditation means clearing the brain, clearing the mind. It does not work that way. That's called brain dead. It's not okay. The brain is going to be constant. The mind is going to be constant. It's going to be in some sort of default mode. That's how we're able to drive places and have a conversation at the same time, or how we're able to walk and chew gum at the same time. So we just give ourselves permission to begin again. Mindfulness is the acceptance of the wandering mind and knowing that it wanders, and it's going to wander to these anxious places that it's wandered to every day, because that's its habit, that's its footpath. And it's going to take practice, and it's going to take patience and reassurance to say, oh, hey, mind, okay, you wandered this way again to the past that, I can't control, that's already happened, or you've wandered this way to the future that I have no idea what's actually going to happen. I see you, begin again. I'm going to bring you back gently and kindly, not, God, I suck, I can't even focus. Oh, that's not helping, right? Gently and kindly bringing it back. And a good thing to do is to practice. So we have these anxious situations, like you said, you're sitting in a cubicle. It's going to be a little difficult to jump into a practice like that or to know what to do if we haven't gained a little experience. So I encourage people to, when they're brushing their teeth, and I encourage you to try this tonight, and please let me know how it goes. But when you're brushing your teeth, just notice how much your mind wanders then. I mean, if you think about it, you wake up in the morning, you brush your teeth, you're thinking about what you got to do that day. Do I have time to shower? What am I going to make for breakfast? Are the kids awake yet? We're not thinking about what we're doing. And that's just 2 minutes of a day in the morning, 2 minutes at night when we're thinking, oh, I didn't get enough done today, or I'm not going to sleep well. I didn't sleep well last night. I'm hurting, or however, we're essentially crapping on ourselves, bookends of our day. And if that's the beginning and the end, what's the middle like when our mind is wandering away from what we're doing, which it's bound to do? It does this most frequently when we're driving or self-grooming. So instead, while you're brushing your teeth, just notice how many times it wanders and begin again. Bring it back. Bring the mind back to focus on the sensation of the bristles on the gums, taste of the put my hand on my hip like Peter Pan. I'm like, oh, I didn't know I did this, but I do it every time I brush my teeth. Didn't notice until I paid attention to it. But when you see how much your mind is wandering and you begin again, that's a nice way of practicing bringing the mind back and practicing being comfortable with the fact that it wanders and a little more forgiving.
I think that's good advice. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and maybe that'll help everyone be kind to each other. And I'm pretty sure I could tell you right now throughout a day how focused my mind is on just the present. And that might only be the 2 minutes that, a person spends brushing their teeth. And that's my entire waking day of 2 minutes of focus. So I will do my best to try to bring that back.
Yeah. And gently and kindly and patiently, with an attitude of curiosity and friendship more so than ridicule or control. Just gently noticing like, oh man, there goes my mind again, wandering. Isn't that interesting? How much, even in this time, and where it goes. A little self-study, but a kind self-study, not one that you necessarily need to explore and be like, oh, what's wrong with me? But just, oh, okay, I noticed that. I noticed that on days that this happens, I'm even more easily distracted, or days that this doesn't happen, I'm able to bring it back to me, because hurt people, and healing people help to heal people. And if we're hurting ourselves, if we're ridiculing ourselves, and if we're diminishing our efforts day in and day out, let alone the very beginning of our day and the last thing we do before we go to sleep, like you said, be kind to others. How kind can we be to others if we're not first kind to ourselves?
I think that's a very good point. From your experience when you were in the dispensary, can you just give a high level for people who aren't fully immersed into the legal cannabis marijuana industry? How have things changed? What is the different types of strains that people can come across, and possibly some of the benefits they might have?
Well, that is one of the awesome perks to it being illegal for so long. There's two things I've always said have been a promising advantage, is that because legalization took forever, it gave an opportunity for women and people of color to get their foot in the door at least a little bit, if they have the capital and the resources. Because if this had been around since the 1700s consistently, and the early 1900s even, when it became illegal, it would be a totally absolute white man dominated industry. So there's been a little advantage there. And there's also been the advantage of keeping the strain names. In Canada, not so much. They changed the names for a lot of things. But here we have strains that the sweet old man that came in with Parkinson's, he bought himself a half ounce of Pootie Tang with a smile on his face. And whenever an older person comes in and says, oh, let me get some of that Alaska Thunderfuck, I say, I'll get that right for you. I mean, it's such a little like, that's what you get, the man, whatever, that's what you get. We get to keep these names. The downside to that is people put a lot of stock in those names. Now, you'll hear of certain ones that they're Pineapple Express, Blissful Wizard, Northern Lights, Girl Scout Cookie, these runts, these are strains that people know very well. Every one is not the same. It's just like any other plant, it's not going to be a clone. Bananas, a clone, but this head of celery, it's still a head of celery, but it's not going to be the same as this head of celery. So like right here, I have Captain's Cake. Here in Maryland, we have the advantage of having all this information. It's a little blurry, I'm sorry, but all this information on here, there we go, of terpenes and cannabinoids, and letting us know the percentages of each. So batch to batch, grow to grow, it's going to have different percentages of these terpenes. So people think like, oh, okay, well, this strain treats me really well. and then they'll have it and it won't be the same experience because this batch, this grow, that was last year. This grow right here, they're chasing that money because even cannabis growers are doing that. They're chasing the THC. This right here, the THC is 29.24%. That's pretty high. 10 years ago, we'd be like, whoa, that's crazy high. Now they have strains that are like 35, 36% THC. That's crazy high. So you have to adjust your dosage according to that. And that could be the same strain. And just a month later, it's got different terpenes, different cannabinoids, different THC percentage. So that's been a big change that, folks that'll come in that believe themselves to be seasoned smokers. Oh, I smoked a lot of weed back in the 60s and they have it. And that is not your street-born ditchweed anymore. This is, the horticulturalist sat here and engineered this terpene profile to get that. As I said earlier, the science should be where we're able to do that really directly and create the same exact terpene profile over and over again. The science should be there. There's Dr. David A. Dawson, who's a biomolecular psychologist. He's down in Florida, and he works for Spectral Analytics in New York. Incredible work. He's doing incredible work to create terpene profiles to treat specific afflictions like PTSD, like diabetes, because there's the omega acid effect with cannabis. That's a whole other conversation because cannabis can help with diabetes. That's huge. It's a big problem in the United States. So having the terpene profiles, which not all states have, it's really annoying as a coach that like New Jersey doesn't have terpene profiles and everything. Even Washington, who's had like a decade more time than everybody else, they don't have full terpene profiles on all their products. But it's helpful to understand all the different components. So okay, this Girl Scout cookie actually has way more myrcene than I'm able to tolerate. Let me look over here at this. Okay, this is a different strain, but this has a similar terpene profile to the Girl Scout cookie that I had because I've taken notes because my coach taught me to. And I know that this is the variety that will help me. That's why I like to say chemotype and cultivar also as opposed to strain, because the lexicon is important. I won't use marijuana. I'll say cannabis. It's important to me that if we're going to squash the stigma, people learn the proper terms, but still use the strain names when making the purchases because we deserve it. That's my biggest takeaway from my changes of the dispensary experience.
So that was good that you said to take notes because your coach told you. So if you were at a dispensary and then you purchase one of the strains and you go home, you happen to like the effects that it gave on you. So in New Jersey, how would they figure that out? You're shit out of luck and sorry, next time you go in and you get captain's cake and now you're falling asleep on the couch and last time you were social and hanging out.
Guesstimating a bit, researching, taking notes of the effect, but looking online to see what other people in other states have kind of reported, like, okay, this is higher. What are the leading terpenes? Oftentimes they can say the leading terpenes are myrcene, pinene, limonene. Okay. Myrcene helps cannabis to last longer. So if you have pain, it's also anti-inflammatory. It's anti-spasmodic. It's really good for, say, my Parkinson's patient. Pinene, that's a focusing one. That's good if you don't want to have any of the forgetfulness because they're linking that to memory retention, but it's also super focusing. So if you have ADD can be hyper-focused, but it can also be distraction. If you're distracted, pinene can support you there. If you're anxious, you're just going to focus in on that super fun thought parade that's trampling through your brain. So pinene might not be for you. So seeing that in the leading terpenes can tell you maybe not. And limonene is super energizing. So learning about the terpenes, even if you don't know this, the specific percentages, but knowing what the leaders are will help you to learn, and taking note of your particular system because people are paradoxical. Indica, you may have heard, puts you into couch. Indica is good nighttime. It's good relaxing. Sativa is good for daytime. That's going to help energize. If I'm cleaning the house, I'm leaning into lemon skunk. That's a sativa that's got limonene in it, which is also present in lemons. And you may have heard that squeezing some lemon into tea can give you like an energetic boost. If I'm going to chill on the couch and watch The Office and relax at the end of the day and I'm feeling sore, I'm going to find an indica, something that's heavier in myrcene or something that's heavier in linalool, which is present in lavender and helps bring on those sedative effects. Knowing that is the same as knowing if you want to have chamomile tea or orange zinger. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And that was the question I think I was getting at from before, but that definitely answers the question of the different types you should look at if you want to have a certain experience. It's amazing that it's come
I'm
this
definitely
far.
knowing. Yeah, I know, right? But it's definitely worth knowing, how you react specifically and what you consumed that day. Again, if you have a lot of mango, then you've already got some myrcene going. If you have black pepper, you've got some beta caryophyllene going. If you have lemon in your tea along with the cannabis that you're consuming, it's going to energize more. So knowing that, okay, if limonene exacerbates my anxiety at all, which for some people it does, I had something with lemon in it earlier. I want to make sure I don't partake of cannabis that has high in limonene right now because I have a bucket, and once the bucket is full, it's uncomfortable. Knowing those things can be really, really beneficial. Also understanding sometimes while cannabis can bring our thoughts to hyper awareness of something that maybe we don't want to think about, it also highlights the work that we need to do. Why is this something that's lingering in our mind? Is this offering a safe opportunity for us to mentally process it? And what's called hyper priming. If you've ever consumed cannabis and then watched a movie that you've seen 1,000 times, but suddenly you're like, oh, okay, I get that now. I'm making this connection. That's hyper priming. That euphoria, or not euphoria, the eureka, when we're connecting two seemingly unconnectable things, that can help in our anxiety too, bringing stuff to the forefront so we can clean out the wound instead of smack on another bandage.
So you were talking about the THC percentage in your Captain's Cake was 29%.
Mm-hmm.
What is the range that so I guess you looked at it as like an alcohol by volume type of thing?
Yeah, which again is unique to everybody. I worked with somebody at the dispensary that could eat an entire bag of Betty's Eddies, which is 5 fruit chews, each with 5 milligrams of THC each. So that's 25 milligrams of THC they'd be taking, and he felt nothing. But he could have a hit off of a dab rig of some concentrate, and he was on Mars riding dinosaurs. So it really depends on your tolerance, your experience, again, what you consumed, and just your system. Some people don't feel anything with edibles at all, or they don't get the effect that they're desired. Some people will soak in some bath salts and they'll get a groove going, just absorbing it transdermally. So it's really person to person. The range goes from, almost 0%, like 0.3% for high CBD, all the way up into, if you're getting into concentrates, it gets pretty high up there. And like oil pens, like vapes and things like that, you're getting into the 70s of percentage and stuff like that. So you want to have less of a concentrate in a vape than you would of flower, which is probably the mid-teens to mid-30s is what you're going to see the most, from the lower side to the higher side.
So nobody's ever overdosed from marijuana. You can't have too much of it, is a saying that everyone's always said. But these higher concentrates, there has to be something, if you can speak to it, or if you don't, that's fine too. The youth, the teenagers, you're not just going to the local guy anymore and getting a dime bag and you're smoking dirt weed, or maybe a guy's cousin got some Maui Wowie, whatever they told you it was, and you paid more for it. But now you're in the 40% THC range. What's your feelings on that? Do you think there is any connection there for a long-term issue, a short-term issue, a long-term issue, a developing issue?
Certainly. Less in terms of dependency. They will say, oh, you feel anxious if you stop smoking weed. Well, maybe you were anxious and it was treating your anxiety and you stopped taking your medication. That's one thing. But brain development in particular, when it comes to teenagers, I strongly discourage heavy cannabis use and the high THC, because it's going to alter the brain structure. It's going to alter the neurotransmitters. We know about neurogenesis now. You may recall when we were younger, they said if you smoke weed, you're going to burn away your brain cells and you never get them back. You only have so many, right? But now we know we are producing brain cells still until we die. We're making new brain cells. Neurogenesis is real, and cannabis, actually, CBD, promotes that. But not if we are smoking ourselves stupid every day. People who are adults, you want to consume, you want to relax, I'm for it. But to use it to completely numb ourselves, that is abuse. That is a thing. I think that teenagers should stay on the lower side of the THC if there's something that they're treating, that they have some sort of affliction. Bipolar has shown to have promise with cannabis. And of course, as I mentioned, anxiety, ADD, and all those things. But there are other ways to consume also besides inhalation. So we don't necessarily need to enter, plant material in there. Higher CBD, lower THC, so they're not getting high all the time. That's something else that working with a professional can help people understand. There's other ways to administer, like topically. Transdermal is not necessarily going to have the same euphoric effects. The one that is really not fun, but is super effective for pain, is suppositories. High amounts of THC can go in that way, but it's not going to be metabolized through the liver. So people who have severe back pain can pop in a cannabis, a high THC suppository at bedtime and relieve their pain without getting stoned. These things are really important for people to know, so they have the options, especially the younger folks whose brains are still going until what, our 20s? I think they're still developing until we're like 27.
Yeah, I saw mid-20s the other day in a news article. Of course, if you're not of legal age, you shouldn't be doing it. But, everybody knows you're going to find a way to get it if you want it. Everybody drinking in high school, things like that, smoking marijuana in high school, whatever it might be, things that you weren't supposed to do. So
there's
I think it's good.
A lot of risks with the street. I accidentally smoked something that had been sprayed with Raid when I was in high school because I was smoking out of ignorance, and it was a bad day. It was a really bad day. And there could be anything else in there with it being regulated, with it being legal. That's why I encourage people also to go the medicinal side instead of recreational, because medicinal is going to have more regulation. They're not only going to check to make sure that the product itself is safe, like oils and concentrates, but that the flower isn't grown with harmful fertilizers and pesticides that could harm the consumer. They're going to make sure there's no toxic metals. There's a lot that, and it's also less expensive to go with medical than it is to go with recreational. There's a lot of reasons. I have a whole blog post about it because people think, oh, I might as well just go buy it from my buddy anyway because it's a lot cheaper. Well, why is a McDonald's burger a lot cheaper than a salad? Because it's cheaply made, right? If you can grow your own, all the power to you.
Does Maryland allow home growth?
Come in July.
Oh, there you go.
July, yes. And all my supplies have been anxiously waiting in the garage for
I was going to ask if you were excited. I couldn't tell.
Oh, very, 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 very. And I've been saving seeds in a little bank for long. Anything that comes through in here gets stashed away to see what we can get going. But it's always stuff that I know, like, okay, that worked for me, and we'll see when I grow, it's going to be a completely different condition. There's only one grower on the Eastern Shore, where I live in Maryland, that they grow outside. Everything else is inside. So that's another problem with the cannabis industry as it is today. We can't trade across state lines. So like anything that they grow in Maryland can't be consumed in Jersey and vice versa, not legally. So if you've ever heard of land races, that's the cannabis that grew, like in Jamaica had lamb's ear and Mexico had Acapulco gold. Like that's the original cannabis that grew there back in the ancient times, and then they've mixed them all together and all these other strains. Well, they're influenced by the amount of natural sunlight they get. They're influenced by the time of year. There's Girl Scout cookie season, so to speak. So being grown in like a box isn't necessarily going to produce the same medicine as something that's grown outdoors. So when it's federally legal and we can kind of grow things specifically to their climate the same way that we do vegetation, that's going to make such a difference in the medicine that we consume. I'm really excited to see that boom. And people are able to kind of do that on their own now by growing in their yards and growing in their garages. Oregon, they can. I think in Maine, they can have quite a few plants. Can't wait.
You brought up about crossing state lines. If I had a prescription medication, I could go from New Jersey to Delaware, Pennsylvania, and wouldn't run into an issue. Now, if you have a handgun in New Jersey and you cross state lines, or vice versa, you're not bringing a unregistered firearm, or I guess it is registered, but you're not allowed to cross state lines with a firearm, and New Jersey will nail you. For marijuana that is medicinal, are you allowed to cross state lines? Are you allowed to fly? Or
no, not legally, no.
So if you were to fly and you need it medicinally, if you were to fly to California, well, I guess it's recreational there, so you could just walk in and get it. No, I answered my own question.
Some states also practice reciprocity, like Maine does. My medical card would work in medical dispensaries in Maine, but that's not true the other way around. People would come into our dispensary. I live 10 minutes outside of Ocean City, and the dispensary I worked at was Positive Energy in West Ocean City, and people would come here for vacation. And so, but I have a medical card in Jersey. I'm sorry, this is Maryland, and legally we can only sell to Maryland patients. You can come from out of the county, you can come from the other side of the state, but you can't come from a different state. Not as of right now.
Yeah, they need to fix that. If you're going to make it legal, you should try to help out as many people as you can.
I agree. That's why, well, DC, anybody can buy in DC, which is a really weird situation down there. Their legal cannabis is wacky. They had pop-ups for the longest time, not even like a physical location. You had to find it to buy it. But you could get it no matter where you're from.
Weird. DC. Okay. Only in DC.
I know.
Like a scavenger hunt, and maybe you'll find the weed, or maybe you won't.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll lose your car. Who knows? All right, Lizy, what else? Do you have anything else you want to cover?
No. I think I covered a lot. I hope I didn't overwhelm with so much information. I can nerd out about cannabis all day. If you have any questions, please throw them my way.
No, this was very educational. Legal cannabis, I knew very little about. I know they made it legal in New Jersey, medicinally and recreationally, but not something I ever really looked into. And I think this was enlightening for people who might not know, to see that what it can do for pain, what it can do for anxiety. Also, while coupling that with other health and wellness and things like that to make it as a complete whole. I think that's good. But I think it's very interesting. Go ahead. Yes.
That's a point that I should make. Full spectrum, which is in the name of my practice. For those who don't know what that means, there's CBD that people will often buy in stores that will have fillers. Please don't buy your CBD at like the gas station. But there's CBD that will have just CBD, and that's an isolate. Or there's broad spectrum, which will have other terpenes and cannabinoids in it. And then there's full spectrum that will have some THC and a whole host of other terpenes and cannabinoids, because there's something called the entourage effect. If you've ever been to an orchestra performance, you know that just the percussion going, like, yeah, that's cool, you'll get a headache eventually, or just the woodwinds, that sounds nice, the strings, that sounds nice. But when you pull them all together, now you have a symphony. Same thing as with a salad. A bowl of lettuce is food in your belly, but it's a bowl full of lettuce, But you add carrot, you add tomato, you add oil, you add vinegar, you add salt and pepper. Now you have a salad, and that's synergy. That's 1 + 1 equaling more than 2. It's the same of cannabis, and it's the same of wellness lifestyle, of really tending to one's real self-care. Yes, cannabis can be helpful. Yes, mindfulness can be helpful. Yes, movement can be helpful. Yes, what you're consuming, food-wise and entertainment-wise, can be helpful. But when you tend to all of these things, that's the full spectrum. And that's going to really get to the root of problems, and that's going to really provide opportunity to heal. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. Yes, coupling with other things can bring it all to a whole new level.
Great, perfect. You mentioned a blog. So do you have a blog going on? Do you have a website that people can go to?
Yes, www.growfullspectrum.com. I have a blog on there. It's been neglected for the last year as I reevaluated time management, but I'm actually going to be putting out a new blog post this month and a new newsletter this month for 420, the Cannabis Underground holiday that's approaching. There is a blog on my site actually explaining the origins of 420. I have posts on why vaping is good, and what to do if you overburn your toast if you consume too much cannabis. All different kind of topics to touch on: PTSD management, cannabis education, what anandamide really does, what the endocannabinoid system is. So just resources I like. I mostly have written them to offer to my clients to kind of save time in their sessions. Like, I'll send them some slides, or I'll send them a recording to say, okay, here's something that I want you to educate yourself on, and then we'll discuss it in our session, because we only have so much time. I actually meet with my clients for 90 minutes. So it sounds like a lot of time, but for the movement and mindfulness that we do, rather than, listen to me talk like you just had to do for forever and ever, I'll send them like a blog post that will teach them about certain things.
This was educational. If they listen to you for 90 minutes, they're going to come out of it much better than they went into it. So
thank you so much.
It was great. Yeah.
Very kind of you. I'm grateful.
Oh, yeah. So new clients, they should go to your website?
Or they can message me on Facebook. They can email me at Lizy, Lizy Maratea, Maratea, at growfullspectrum.com. I have a Facebook group, Balance and Independence through Self-Compassion. It's a private group where I have a bunch of live videos. Well, the replays now. I do Terpene Tuesday and go over different terpenes and different cannabinoids and mindfulness exercises. So all the recordings are there. I'm regularly sharing content in support of personal growth and development and growth mindset and cannabis education. So it's kind of a place where I bring all of those different avenues for wellness together, and the community can support one another in their endeavors. It's a nice thing to have.
Yeah, it's great. The more information you can have, the more community, the sense of community, I think it's going to help people too. I think that's just perfect. Yeah. So everybody out there, go to Lizy's webpage, sign up, become part of the Facebook group. Let her know that you found her on Wild and Weird. Let's grow her business. Let's get her to hire someone else on her business. And thank you so much for coming on. I truly appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. It's my pleasure. I had a wonderful time talking with you.
Thank you. Have a great night.
You do the same.
All right, everyone. That was our show. Don't forget to leave a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you stream your podcast. Like and follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram to stay up to date in all things wild and weird. Check out the links in the show notes for more information on our guest. The biggest support you can offer is to tell everyone about the podcast. Until next time.